Hey, Paul.
Hello, welcome to Lunch with Simply Thick. I'm Paul Haefner, and today I've made chicken and rice with carrots and guacamole or avocado on one plate to IDDSI level 4 puree, level 5 minced and moist, and level 6 soft and bite-sized. Right here in my kitchen in Dallas. Short disclaimer before we start. If you're at your house, like I am, cooking for yourself or someone else, you're recommended to be using the IDDSI framework. It's recommended as the system by which a person is given texture restrictions in the first place to make chewing, swallowing, and eating as safe as reasonably practical. However, if you work in a commercial facility, that is if the state or the federal government, JCO or Joint Commission, inspects your buildings and you're required to follow building or corporate policy, then you've likely already transitioned to IDDSI or have it on the schedule. And that's because the National Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the American Speech and Hearing Association have both put it in as their primary standard of care. If you have not heard of IDDSI in a commercial facility, please hit us at SimplyThick.com for more information, samples, and anything we can do to help. So the 3 plates we've got, we're going to review each of these and we're going to pull them apart a little bit and test them to the IDDSI standards. But before we do that, I'm going to show you how I made one of these pieces, and that's going to be the minced and moist right here in the middle chicken breast. And you can see that this chicken breast is in fact already manipulated by the machine. It's holding together. We did put some marks on it, but we're going to show you how we did that.
That looks great, Paul.
Thanks. Slide these over a little bit. So this chicken is an assortment of leftover chicken from the refrigerator, and I found about 8 ounces of fajita chicken in the freezer that I was never going to eat again. So I grabbed that and have got it all processed. What I did just now was add in the juices that I took out before I put it in the processor, because I've got to make sure I get the texture right, and then I'll come back and make sure I get enough moisture into this. So if your question is, how am I making that chicken breast look like a chicken breast after I started with this? Here is the answer. We get the portion, and this is about 2.5 portions of minced chicken. I take my handled food form, hit it with a little bit of pan release spray, and I put the minced and moist chicken into the handled food form. We'll level it out. Try not to throw it all over the counter. Usually a knife or a spatula works better right about here, so we can smooth it out. And we put it right on the plate. Assuming I put in enough pan spray. Every once in a while, especially when you're in a hurry, you have to tend to the shape, but that gets us right to where we put that on the plate.
That is so much more visually appealing than a scoop.
Leslie, there is a Rush University clinical study where they controlled for the shape of the purees.
I'm familiar with it.
And it may not shock you to hear then that shaped purees, patients ate 500 more calories per day when the only difference was purees in a shape versus purees just plopped on 3 compartments in a plate. 500 calories translates to just under 1 pound per week. So especially in long-term care buildings where we have issues with unintended weight loss, that is certainly something we can use to our advantage. So if we can shape the food and get people to buy in with their eyes and then the smell. Exactly. So that part made sense in how we're forming it and what we did. I didn't mention it, but this was the leftover drippings from when I prepared the rice. So I had a little extra from one of the batches. So instead of mixing in water or a vegetable stock, I used something else that was already going to be on that plate. Okay. All right. So level 6, soft and bite size. Things like the chicken, that's real easy to test, right? It fits in the blue box. If it fits in the blue box, it can be the right size. I can press on it with a fork and does it, squish and not come back to its original shape. So that's squished. And can I cut it in half with the side of a fork or spoon? And we're in great shape on the level 6. Same thing with the carrots. That's relatively easy. to get done. And obviously carrots, when they're cooked or steamed in this case, don't put up much of a fight. Guacamole, this is right out of the freezer case or the refrigerator case at Kroger. And this works without a problem. It's going to meet all the standards. It's going to be real fine for level 5 as well. The rice, we're going to leave a little bit of sample of this rice. I did not heat up this particular plate because I was not planning on eating the soft and bite size, but we'll test that in a second. So cold rice, we'll get to in a second, would be a huge challenge compared to hot rice. Same drill with the minced and moist chicken breast that we just processed. I'm going to use a fork. When the pieces of food are coming through the fork, that is confirmation that we have a good size on those pieces. And then the last test, obviously we decided they already fit. I checked that when they were in the food processor. And then the last test for chicken will be, can I take a small portion and will it come off the spoon all at one time? And is the portion behind still sticky? No, chicken is not sticky in this case. So that's all going to pass without an issue. I am going to put this rice in the microwave for 1 minute.
Paul, did you
Yes,
have
ma'am.
any difficulty breaking down the carrots to level 5?
Carrots were a snap. I steamed the carrots. I saved some of the juice. I didn't need much of it. And I just processed the carrots in the food processor after they'd been steamed. So I left a little bit of skin on, just cut off the gnarly bits, steamed them thoroughly, put them in the food processor, and pulled those out without an issue. This is the pureed plate. Yeah, so we'll get the pureed carrots, for example. Carrots just come out like a dream. Most of the time, you don't need to add any thickener or stabilizers. And these were good fresh carrots from the produce department, so they were tasty. So the carrots pass on puree without an issue. This is not actually guacamole. It's just avocado that I ground up in the mortar and pestle. It looks like you can see little bits in the guacamole. You can see them, but you can't feel them with your tongue. Leslie, do you have any comment about something like that?
Well, as long as you can see the particles in there, but as long as once it enters the oral cavity, if there aren't lumps, if it is smooth, and if you've got a really ripe avocado, I would imagine that it would be smooth. You want to make sure that if there are obvious bits in there, that they are very small. And when you do the palate test or put it a little bit in your mouth, that you don't feel firmer lumps.
Precisely. And that's where I was, because it was very ripe avocado. And you can still see what should look like bumps, but when you get to them with your fingers or your tongue, I don't feel any resistance. So it's a little bit of a mind trick with the visual versus the tongue and the reality. Okay, so this is the level 5 rice. And this, Leslie, is, I can tell already. Now, this was made yesterday and I loved it when I made it.
Is it sticky when it's reheated?
It is sticky right now when it's reheated. It came off the spoon okay, but you can almost see the way this is hanging, that's going to be sticky. And when I put it in my mouth, I'm already getting my tongue in the roof of my mouth fighting over it. So that's too sticky.
Instant brown rice, or what type of rice did you prepare?
So this is Knorr brand Mexican rice, in this case, that's on the plate.
Okay.
This also has pasta in it, the way they make it. And that actually seems to help because it's a very light, thin, as you mentioned when we were testing earlier, a vermicelli type noodle. So the pasta is not putting up much of a fight. And the rice in this is freeze dried. It's already been cooked and dried. So some of the starch was knocked out of this at the factory. All I did was add a little extra moisture and let it sit a little bit longer. And I got a much better result than the Ben's original ready rice in this case. And this is real popular. We use this at our house for almost everything. This format where it's 90 seconds in the microwave. It's really easy to use. There's nothing wrong with this product at all, especially for convenience. The challenge is where the Knorr brand is a freeze-dried product. And this is the rice and the pasta we're dealing with. This rice was cooked and never re-dried. So it's just been in
Stored
hold
moist.
while it's in that package. So it's just going to give us a different result. We'd really have to knock a lot more of the starch out of the ready rice, out of the Ben's original, to get the result that would mirror the Knorr, because they did some of the work for us at the factory.
Right.
Rice is a challenge. Yeah.
Rice is always a challenge, and we have to be careful because working in acute care and with outpatients as well, people would come in and they would say that they were struggling with different foods. And I would say that 99% of the time, rice was among the foods that people were struggling with. And that's because it could be sticky, or smaller particles could fall, the bolus could break apart, and they could, go into the upper airway, the little individual pieces of rice. So we just want to be very careful that it's not too sticky, and that when we're doing minced and moist, it's cohesive.
And rice is a constant challenge, correct, Leslie? With texture modified, anybody with a choking
Right.
issue, rice is just on the list of things that are going to be a challenge all the time.
Yes.
Awesome. So what could we do to wash down that rice, do you suppose?
Well, what if we had an L2 margarita with some ice cubes that have been thickened to L2 as well? So when they melt, and they will, they won't compromise the integrity of my margarita. Yum.
That's delightful.
This is good.
Excellent. Do we have any tough questions off the top of your head, Liz?
So far, we have gotten some great comments just about how beautiful those plates look. And I'm going to spotlight those plates one more time just so we can take a look at them. We do have a question about our cutting board. So Paul, could you give us a little bit of info about where people can find that cutting board?
That cutting board is available at SimplyThick.com. I think that's the only place you can get your hands on it right this second. And
That's
go ahead.
true. Is can I put it in the dishwasher, because I'm not very good at washing anything?
Well, you can. I would suggest top rack, and if you can keep it flat, all the better. If you can't, you may have to flatten it out a little bit when it's done in the dishwasher.
Awesome.
But top shelf should be fine.
Paul,
Yes,
when
ma'am.
we have these cutting boards made, the dye or the ink that is used on the cutting board is not on the surface. So people can actually cut on the cutting board without impacting the ink. Am I correct?
You are correct in that, right? So if anybody got the first version of the cutting board that we had made, it was a decal on one side of the piece of plastic, and the version we have had for the last 6 to 9 months, the printing is sandwiched in between the plastic, so none of that can come off, and it works really well.
Great information. And then we do have another question that just came through. I'll go ahead and throw it up on the screen for all of our live viewers. This question comes in from our follower, Sarah. She says, what can I do if I made rice and it is too sticky? That's a great question.
I would add more L4 to it to make it a little moister.
If the rice is already cooked, right, liquid is about all you're going to be able to do. It depends, again, if it's short grain white rice. We had success with, people use rice in hundreds of different ways in different dishes. So if you're just eating a bowl of rice, like steamed white rice, that is going to be really difficult to knock enough of the starch out of that to make it pass. The success we had was overcooking the rice, rinsing it thoroughly, and then for the level 4, we ended up having to add some milk to it. That would be a good solve as well. If you don't like dairy milk, you could go coconut milk. If that doesn't fit with the dish you're doing, then I would switch over to something like a vegetable stock or a chicken stock and try and loosen it up that way a little bit. The trick to getting rice, to keeping the sticky out of rice, is knocking it out when you're cooking it, and you still can get rid of some of the starch.
Note it. Yeah, rice can be a sticky situation, so we have to be careful with that. And then we do have another question that came in from our follower, Nancy. She says, how much liquid drippings did you add to the L4 puree, and how much SimplyThick?
The carrots have no Simply Thick and no thickened liquid at all. That was just the drippings from the steamed carrots. Guacamole has nothing in it. That gives up pretty easily. This is the puree plate, so this is avocado as opposed to guacamole. I did take some juice out of my jar of candied jalapenos. I live in Texas. I've developed a little bit of a taste for spice. So like it's a lot of trouble to grind up or to pulverize the jalapenos themselves, but the jalapeno juice still adds the kick. The rice has got no Simply Thick in it. The chicken does have some Simply Thick in it just to bind it, very similar to what we did with the little example on the minced and moist.
Fabulous. And Leslie, I'd like to take it back to you for a minute and chat a little bit more about that ice. So Paul, enjoy your food for a moment. Leslie and I are going to chat ice. Yeah, let's take a look at that because I feel like we breezed over that pretty quickly. We're so used to the wonders of thickened ice, but many people don't know how this can be made. So how did you make this? Is it complicated?
Not at all. And living in Phoenix, it gets a little warm here in the summer, and people like ice in their tea and in their lemonade and all of their beverages just to stay cool. And before Simply Thick came along, you would have to add extra thickener to your beverage because you were going to be putting ice in, and you knew that the ice would thin it out, and it became a science project. All you have to do to make the ice is make an ice tray as you normally would, but in a glass, put your 8 ounces or 10 ounces of water. Add your Simply Thick to whatever level it might be that you want. I did level 2 today because my margarita is level 2. Put the thickened water into your ice tray, freeze it like you normally would, and then take it out as needed. And it will keep your drink cool. And when it melts, it won't compromise the integrity of your beverage. It will stay safe, and you won't have a science project. You'll have a delicious tasting drink, whatever it should taste like. The ice cubes won't change the flavor. They'll just keep it nice and cool.
That sounds delicious. Remind me, what flavor did you do today? Lime, did you say?
I just did a traditional, I bought the bottle of the premix margarita and just added the Simply Thick. I did 2 packets for 8 ounces of Jose Cuervo light margarita.
Light. When you drink as many margaritas as Leslie, you got to watch the calories. So
Easy, Haefner.
and mix in bulk.
It's so easy to mix the beverages, and you can mix any kind of alcoholic beverage with Simply Thick. If it's okay with your doctor, then you can tolerate it safely. And the ice make it nice and cold. Who wants a warm drink?
I would say you can still thicken your beverage even if your doctor doesn't say so. But
I happen to know some people who thicken their margaritas, even though they don't need thickened margaritas. College age people that like to play tricks. But it
makes sense to me. No one wants a water thin margarita, or in my opinion, I'm always a go-to for the frozen margaritas and the thicker drinks. So sounds delicious. Paul, how's your food?
Delightful. Thank you for asking.
Delightful, fabulous.
The redone.
One more thing I'd like to mention is that Paul and Leslie were involved in this book that recently came out called Modern Dysphagia Cooking. So some of these recipes and tips are in the book. This can be checked out at Amazon, and you are welcome to scan that QR code that you'll see on your screen for more information. But we do have tons of fun tricks and tips for IDDSI compliant food, a lot of what you've heard today. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. Before we say goodbye to everyone, any final notes, Paul or Leslie?
Yes, be careful with your guacamole that you make yourself, that you don't include any of the peel or the outer rind.
And also with reheating rice, you want to,
by all means,
be sure that you, if needed, you add the extra moisture, the L4 broth or whatever you choose to put in there.
Cook it longer.
Like reheating it makes it a little stickier, a little firmer. So just add a little extra L4 and you'll be good.
Precisely. You're taking, when we're reheating, we're losing some of the moisture, whether it's microwave, stove top, or anywhere else. So yeah, especially if we refrigerate and then come back, some of that condensation in the refrigerator stays in the container. So we may have to add a little bit more moisture And that's our job every time we're putting the plate down, is to make sure it meets for that patient at that time.
Exactly.
Awesome.
You know what? One more question actually that we just got in. If you were to make this food and then you decided you wanted to have leftovers tomorrow, could you put it in the fridge and then eat it tomorrow? Would it still be IDDSI compliant?
Essentially, that's just what we did, because I made all these plates yesterday. Carrots were fine, guacamole's fine, chicken was fine, rice needed attention. And that fits with rice being difficult and on the edge in the first place. So if I was not just pulling this out, but preparing it for somebody, I would have modified this rice before I set it down. This is just a little too sticky for puree.
But it is good to know that you can, in fact, save leftovers for the next day. And with a little fine tuning, it will be safe to present the second day as well.
Well, that's a good point. And this chicken in particular, I had cooked this chicken, prepared this chicken 3 weeks ago, did a series of portions, froze them, put them in vacuum bags in a little vacuum machine. So I just pulled this out and microwaved it from 3-4 weeks ago, and it's fine. So, but again, it was vacuum packed, so I wasn't losing moisture while it was in the refrigerator or the freezer.
Wonderful. Well, Paul, Leslie, thank you so much for all of the fun tips that you share with us. For everyone watching, thank you for joining us. If you aren't watching live and you're watching the recording, you are welcome to still reach out to us via any of our social media platforms. We would love to share more tips and tricks with you. Please join us. We go live every first and third Friday with some exceptions. So stay tuned to our social media platforms for information about our next live stream. Have a great, happy Cinco de Mayo.